Acts chapter 27, verses 16 and onward. Okay? That's where we're going to start at. 16.
Okay.
All right, Acts 27:16. And running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. And after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables and undergirding the ship. And fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis, they let down the sea anchor and so let themselves be driven along. The next day, as we were being violently storm-tossed, they began to jettison the cargo. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. And since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small storm was assailing us, from then on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. And when they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you ought to have followed my advice and not to have sailed from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. And yet now I urge you to keep up your courage, for there shall be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. Therefore keep up your courage, men, for I believe God, that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. We'll stop there. ... Okay? Get it back to a running start on this, right? So as we were joking earlier, they are still at sea and they are still struggling through the storms that is going on here. In 16 it talks about, and running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda. So it is a small island, Clauda. There's not much to it there. High ridges, no beach, kind of island is what that is. What do you think they mean by under the shelter of the island?
The wind couldn't get to them as much.
Yeah,
And or waves, yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not a structure when it talks about a shelter, some kind of nice seaport or anything like that.
The ESV used the word the lee of it.
The lee of it, yeah. That's I like that much better. Yeah,
The lee wind, yeah.
yeah.
They tried to hug the shoreline instead of it going out.
Right. We were running under the shelter of the small island. We were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. A little weird, right?
Yeah, mine
What's
says
the
secure the ship's skiff.
Yes, and that's better, a better word. It's their boat. They had a boat. They had
Like a tender or something?
A tender, yeah.
A rowboat, basically, probably.
Yeah, it's just another little boat because it's a big ship. Remember,
Yeah.
the ship is 267 people capacity. So this is not no 20-footer that you park in your
So
backyard.
this might have been like a lifeboat?
Yeah, this is like a lifeboat, but meant to go ashore. So you anchor so big, you anchor off from the water and you get to shore by the skiff or by that,
Gotcha,
right? So
makes sense.
that's the tender that they use there. Of course, nowadays tender to me means a guy with a real big motor.
Yeah.
Flash in there. This, I'm sure, is still stroke. But it was small enough that they were able to get it back up on board. Okay, so it's not that big, but it's and that's what they mean by scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. They're talking about there's the wind, there's the waves, there's all of that stuff going on. So much so that if you read a little bit in 17, and after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables in undergirding the ship, fearing that it might run aground. So they literally were taking ropes under the ship and keeping it together. That's what they were so worried about. Maybe they just trusted construction. I don't know. It was a big deal. They were really worried here. Fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis. So that's what I was talking about in Africa, or really close to it. They let down the sea anchor and so let themselves be driven along. So sea anchor. We haven't really talked about anchors too much here.
Mine doesn't say sea anchor, they just said they, aground at Serious Sands, they struck sail and so were driven.
That's what mine says, strake sail, and so we're driven.
Struck sail, I always struck sails, the big sails, not
Yeah.
the sea anchor, which
They
is a
may
different
pull the
name.
anchor up when they put the sail up, when they try to go with the sail.
Yeah, but a
They-
sea
they-
anchor's a
they-
different animal, that's where,
Yeah, I'm a stumped too.
The ESV used the word gear and then.
The tackle.
And then in
Yeah.
the footnote, it talked about it might be the anchor or it might be the mainsail.
the sea anchor, we had it in life rafts, you know, when you, basically a long rope, that 40 feet or so, with what looks like a funnel made out of that nylon that life rafts are made out of, with a hole in the bottom. So the idea is that the current waves or whatever will pull that thing, basically just keeps you tugging on the boat, so it doesn't just follow the wave and surf the waves.
Right.
It hangs under the water a few feet,
Yeah,
and it just drags you.
right, it's a
It gives you
stabilizer.
it's a stabilizer, is all it
Stabilizer.
is. It doesn't give you any
Right.
steering capability whatsoever, it just
No.
slows you from being thrown around too
They
much.
do that on the modern sailboats now, especially on monohulls. They have these, they're like flat type of devices that sink into the water on both sides. It prevents all the rocking.
That's kind of like pontoons, isn't it? Is it a
No,
float?
no, this is, you throw it in the water and they actually sink into the water 10, 15, 20 feet. And I guess give more surface area so it's less likely to roll, is what that is. It still does it, but it's nowhere near.
Well, just like pulling anything through water, it takes
Yeah.
resistance, so it
And
gets
exactly, so
down
it
in the water.
increases the
so
resistance, right?
it's-
But I'm really thrown because of the translations I saw, there was anchor all over the place, so not having anchor in the King James.
Or another commentary says the word is uncertain in the old manuscripts. It, you know, and then it goes on to explain why it's probably an anchor, but it said it could be the mainsail.
Wow,
Hmm.
okay. So they were doing things to try to steady the boat.
Yeah,
It's-
either way.
Either
yeah.
way, that's what they were trying
They're
to
trying
do.
anything and everything.
Right, right. But I will tell you, I went off on a Google hunt, right, a Google search hunt on the
Yeah.
word anchor to see what that was. But now it's useless now because it doesn't apply. Forget the Google search.
And it did say probably a steering anchor, so maybe a steering anchor is different than
A hook type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it,
Well, mine says strake sail. I just looked up strake sail, and a strake is a piece of metal that goes under the whole boat from the bow. I just looked it up all the way down, so it might be, like you said, something to drag,
Yeah.
slow it down.
straight sail?
Strake, S-T-R-A-K-E.
Oh, okay.
That's what mine says.
So it's an underwater
Yep.
device.
That's what it said when I looked
Okay.
up the definition just now.
Huh. And which version,
This is the King James, the old King James.
it says straight sail?
Yep.
Because I have the New King James, and it says, didn't even say anything about it.
Mine
Well, it
says
just
should
struck
fall
sail.
into the
Well, let me double
quicksand.
check, it says struck, and I didn't read it.
Strake sail.
No, it says struck sail,
Struck, which is,
S-T-R-U-C-K, which to me is you strike a sail, that just means you pull it up.
well, that's a past tense, if you're going that way with it, because that's struck was straight.
Yeah, but you don't strike a sail, I mean. it-
I understand what
you
you're saying. I don't know. I can't justify
Check it out, yeah.
what it is.
Huh.
Okay, we need all the Bible scholars to get together on that one.
That's the problem, they all did.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
And I,
See the
and I think,
problem?
and I think what we gotta understand, I
Yeah.
think you said, the ESV, a lot of times people don't, I know everybody wants to be King James only. We gotta remember when it was written. And it's gonna astound these King James, and I love King James.
Yeah.
But guess what? In the last 1,000 years, we actually have found manuscripts that actually help us better explain this
Oh, yeah,
Greek language.
yeah.
Luke used a very eloquent Greek language, and Paul did the same thing. As people don't understand, his Greek, because of his trade, it's the high end, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, within the last, I think it was 50 years, we found some other manuscripts that we actually better understand this type of Greek. When the King James was made, I know everybody's gonna be ticked off, do your own research. They did the best they could with what they had to work with.
Yeah.
You said a key word,
Yeah.
scholars and proofreaders put this together, y'all. Investigate your Bible. You know, There's different opinions on things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the word of God, but we're trying to better understand it.
All right, so in the last part of verse 17, the ultimate is, so they let themselves be driven along. I would use one word for that, despair.
Yeah.
For that, just gave up. Whatever you are in your life, they just, nothing you can do. I mean, you can fight all day long, and you just, what else do you do? Right? Wow. And Luke is doing a great job setting this up to explain what's going to be happening here. 18, the next day, as we were being violently storm tossed, they began to jettison the cargo. All right, mine has jettison the cargo. I guess I'm checking. Everybody got something similar to that?
Lightened the ship.
The lightened ship. What was the main purpose of this ship in the first place?
Cargo.
Cargo. Okay.
Money.
Yeah, their goal, they're not gonna get paid if they haven't got their cargo, right?
Hope they had insurance.
If they had insurance, actually, they did not have insurance.
So they're doing anything and everything just to survive.
That's exactly right.
That's it, yeah.
Their their values changed.
Yeah.
What they thought was important no longer was as important as they thought it was, right? How quickly our values can also change on a dime. It doesn't take much to say, you know what, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
You know, this is not worth that. Makes you wonder if it really ever was worth it in the first place. At least it makes me wonder. Okay, and on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. I'm not sure why the phrasing "with their own hands" meant, as opposed to, I guess, the sea throwing it.
Well, that's where my mind went,
They went down on the hull,
they had a choice to
pick it up, carried it, you know. And
as opposed to it was swept off and they had
Right,
to cut the rope
exactly.
with an axe to get
Yeah.
whatever's dangling
That
out.
was my thinking, is that's the only reason why it was stated,
Right.
was to emphasize this was happening here. Again, Luke is building up an illustration of how bad it is. And since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, whatever good navigational aids they used at that time, they didn't have it.
Yeah.
Obviously, no GPS to
Couldn't
work
tell
with.
where
right?
they was.
Yeah.
There was stores and.
Right, even though they were supposedly close to shore, they didn't have cell phone coverage,
Yeah.
you know, to make that happen. They had nothing here. I could just, I was imagining like, well, how can a storm last that long? Well, remember, they're being tossed by the storm, which means they're following the storm.
Right.
They're in the storm, and that's what's keeping them, you know, in the dark. There's no way for them to hold station, hold
Yeah.
ground while the storm moves on, right?
Yeah.
They're just
Sucked with it, yeah.
gone with it. Wow. Here. A understatement of understatements, and no small storm was assailing us. From them, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. It's interesting that Luke put "we" into that statement here. I wonder, because Luke was on this ship at the time, so it makes me wonder: was even Luke, had hope abandoned? Yeah.
I know he knew where he was going.
Well, yeah, he did
That's-
have
I mean, we gotta
that.
look at things from our faith.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean.
Oh, he might be just writing the sentiment of how everybody
The
else
sentiment
felt.
of everybody,
Because
as
he's
opposed to
with
not
Paul.
just.
He was human. Listen, y'all,
Yeah.
he's
He's
human.
with Paul, and Paul said, we're gonna make
You
it.
think he's gonna be
And
dead?
so,
Yeah.
he may have been on board with Paul, we don't know really.
No, he was.
Even Paul may have, before this
Yeah.
vision, whatever you want to call it, that he had a second, he might have also, just because you know you're going to have eternal life somewhere
Yep.
else, doesn't mean you think that your life is going
Amen. That's
not
right.
die
But
here.
God
Amen.
had told Paul,
That's
God
right.
told Paul though, you're all gonna go to Rome,
Right.
and you're all gonna be before Caesar. So he
Fair
had
enough.
that to hold on to.
Yeah,
Fair
but I don't know. Paul also was told not to do several things in his
Yeah.
life by God, and
Yeah.
he did it. So,
But he
and
believed
he's
God.
human.
He
He's human.
believed God, though.
I mean, you can.
Yeah.
Don't think Paul never doubted.
Well, I know he had doubts, but I don't think he doubted in this instance.
I don't know. That's why it'd be
Because the guys were getting ready to leave on the little
I'm with
boat.
you.
And he told the centurion, so they wouldn't. He said, if they leave the boat, then we might lose life. But if they stay on the boat, we'll all make it.
Well, maybe he doesn't mean saved from death, maybe just saved from sinking the boat.
Yeah, that's kind of, exactly. Well, even death, you know, death is a different definition. Death to one person may mean, that's it, final, done. And death is just a door you go through to get to another location,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
And you know you're gonna die. I mean, Paul never said he was never gonna die. He
Right.
just knew that, so that's just one event. And
That's
so
right.
maybe this event is happening here.
Paul was human.
Yeah,
He wasn't
I don't
just-
know.
No.
Yeah.
I think the angel was sent for a reason, like you said, because in the end,
Well, yeah, the angel did go to him to strengthen him because of this situation, I guess, to reaffirm what he already knew.
Yeah.
It like reaffirmed it. you know.
Right.
That's why he stood before him, then said what he said. The angel stood by me. This is what he told me. And so all of a sudden, now they have hope. Where they were like losing hope, but then after Paul speaks, then that gives them some kind of.
I think they lost hope. It was not losing. It was
They
past
lost,
tense.
yeah, they thought this was it.
what about Abraham? You think, I try to put things in perspective with people, Paul's person. Abraham was told by angels, you're gonna have a son.
Oh, yeah.
Did he believe God? Oh, yeah, but what did he do?
Did he really?
Well, it's taking a long time. Let me get this cocky
Oh,
book
yeah.
finally. See, that's what I'm trying to say. We have to be careful that we put these people, they're
Too high,
human.
right.
So there's going to be
Yeah.
some doubt, and I think who knows what Paul was going through, but I think
Yeah.
he hit a key point. If Paul never lost any faith, you think God, I better send this angel.
Well,
I
no,
think
no.
to reaffirm Paul, hey, listen,
Yeah.
I know it's scary, but hang in there.
Yeah.
Hang in there. And I don't think, my personal opinion, I don't think Luke had the faith of Paul. And I think that's, I really don't, because of Paul's transformation from what he was.
And
Yeah.
Luke being the doctor, scientist, might have, all
Yeah.
evidence
Needed
shows.
proof, yeah.
Yeah.
All, everything here is laying out.
It's like we read the
this
ship's
is doom.
log.
Right,
This is what happened.
exactly, right, exactly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's giving you a
21.
lot of detail.
And when they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, and so this is what we're going to talk about. Men, you ought to have followed my advice and not to have set sail from Crete.
Or in Jewish.
Aha.
Yeah, Jewish, yeah, there you go. Had you come out, well, I told you.
Well, you know, when you think at the beginning, when that centurion was getting the results, the captain of the ship and the other guy said, we think we should go.
Yeah.
And so being a captain, you would think, well, he's had more experience, so I'm gonna go with the captain. But now after this happened, and then Paul gets up and says this, now all of a sudden, okay, let's listen to what Paul has to say now.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? I think that's what Paul
I
said.
don't
Y'all
know.
listen, y'all didn't listen.
And maybe it's
Not
because I'm
listen to it.
trying to give Paul some slack here
Yeah.
about his human attitude, kicking in to say, I told you so, I told you so. I don't think that was the intent
Yeah, no.
of what he was trying to say here, is just to remind them. I've had experience before with this. Remember, I've had 3 shipwrecks on my other missionary journeys. I know what it's like to sail in bad weather. You don't want to do it. And I'm reminding you again of my authority of knowledge here that goes on here.
To me, it's
But-
kind of like he's saying, well, I got good news and I got bad news. We
Exactly.
ain't gonna die, but
We're gonna get wet.
we're gonna run aground on something.
Exactly, exactly. And he says, and yet now I urge you to keep up your courage. Before we get into that, as Paul is saying, men, you ought to have followed my advice. But there's a kind of a tone, if you will, in the writing of calmness that is going on. Luke is recording Paul's calm demeanor here. He's not standing and screaming and shouting and, wailing that, this is wrong and,
Yeah.
I told you so. But more of a, okay, guys, let's all acknowledge where we're at. And it's what good leaders do, actually, is they will restate the truth, the hard truth, is that,
But yet it wasn't, they couldn't go to the conference room where it's nice and quiet. And
Right.
Close the door,
Right.
I mean, they're still on a bouncing ship.
and going back and
Yeah.
forth. I told you.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we all should be rocking right now. We can feel it here. So now in 22, and yet now I urge you to keep up your courage, for there shall be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. So what kind of, I mean, if we had stopped the conversation right there, what do you think these listeners, and I don't know if it was all 267 men,
I can't imagine. it
or
would be,
just the
but-
captain and the owner and the guard, and
Was the owner on board?
yeah, yes, according to what was up here earlier.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
They had the owner and the owner and the captain and the guard, the Roman
I'm sorry,
guard.
they agreed to go on.
They
yeah.
agreed, overriding Paul's advice here. If it had just stopped right here, what do you think these guys would have been thinking? Crazy talk, Paul?
Yeah.
Type of thing?
Right.
Obviously, you're not paying attention, Paul. You know,
Yeah.
you're not in the reality here. For this very night, an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood before me, saying, and then he says this message: do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God will be granted you all these who are sailing with you. I don't know. At first, it's like, well, great. I'm still going to prison. Thanks a lot, God. You know, yeah, you pulled me out of the fire to put me in another fire. Thanks a lot.
But yeah, reading Romans though, Paul thought he was going to Spain next. He
Yeah.
just thought it was a stopping
Yeah, it's
point.
just
He
a
never
stopping
thought
point.
that he was going to be convicted.
Right.
That's what we got to remember. Paul's whole thing was, I'm going to get to Spain. This is just going to stop there. So that's the premise we got to understand. You got to read Romans, and then he said, well, I'm just going to stop there. But God's got me going to Spain.
Right.
Again, Paul thought that's what was his mission eventually.
Yeah.
So we got to remember.
But he
that.
also knew that if you're gonna try to get word out to a nation, go to the top.
You gotta go to the top.
I
Yep.
mean, you look at, through history, that's always been the case,
Yep.
where they dictated stuff.
That's right.
And so he knew he was trying to go to Caesar. So I think on one hand, he knew this is the audience that I'm born to
Yep.
do. This is my goal.
Just like the audience he had back in with Festus and all. I mean, he goes the high up the food chain, I like to say. So I think Paul just thought, hey, listen, this is another story. Back to with Festus, now I'm going to Caesar, and then I'm headed to Spain.
Yeah.
And that's what his premise was. If you read Romans, that's what he said.
One of the commentaries I looked at said, not the Bible, but some extra biblical historians, two historians, one in the year 95 and one some year later, recorded that he did go to Spain, that he was imprisoned in Rome
Yeah.
twice. That is, he
Yeah.
got out for a time, went to Spain, he got in prison
Yeah.
the second time. And it was while he was in prison in Rome, I don't know if it was the first or second time, that he wrote some of the letters, like Ephesians and Colossians and
Oh, really?
so
Yeah, it's
forth.
debatable.
Yeah.
That's scholars go back and forth on it also, because some of the writings that we're talking about, that you're talking about, they don't know how reliable it is.
'Cause-
But that story goes back and forth
Yeah,
with the
so
scholars.
he may
It's
have
interesting.
made it.
He may have and he may not have. Most scholars say no because of the lettering, but I'm with you, I've heard that.
Yeah.
It's just, it's back and forth, we don't know.
Yeah,
That's a good point
It's
though.
beyond the Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, extra biblical. So who's this angel? Why an
Messenger.
angel? Why not just a little bit before all of this? Jesus actually appeared to him and told him, "You're doing good. You know, keep on going through all
What's the
this."
job of an angel?
It is
God's
the
messenger.
messenger.
That's God. I mean, why does
So Jesus couldn't have been bothered to go deliver the message himself. He
Ask
had to-
him.
Had to send an email, an angel mail.
You're right. That's right.
Yeah.
There's other stuff going on in the world, you know.
What?
He said this angel needs something to do. He's
Something.
That's right. That's the junior angel. Go tell
Junior
him.
I was
angel,
gonna
go on
go
your
if you wanna
wings.
go.
Go.
Junior.
And when you're done, ring your bell. Okay. So we don't know.
We don't
It's
know.
the point here.
It could have been the Lord.
Yeah, and it was a messenger, right, exactly, here. That he gets this. I would love to have the time, we're been short on time here, of three things that I wanted to look at here was, in verse 23 it says, for this very night an angel of God to whom I belong. He's in the midst of the storm. And how do you weather a storm? I think, one, acknowledge who's really in control.
Right.
Who's the owner, really, of everything? Not only of you, but of the storm itself, right? And I think that's where that calmness that comes in, his hope, his secure is in that here. So whom I belong.
Make a song out of that.
You could almost make a song out of all of this, actually. And then he goes and says, and whom I serve before. So from Paul's point of view, he's on a mission. This is a missionary journey to him, as far as he's concerned.
Yeah.
He's on a mission. That's whom he's serving here. He knows the object or the objective.
He's even preaching right now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he's doing.
Exactly.
To the middle of the ship.
Yeah, exactly. He's got
He's taking advantage
267.
of every
Man,
situation.
there's an audience right there. It's it's every word here.
I don't shut up.
Truly captive audience.
Exactly. Yeah. And the last thing, and we'll stop here, is the phrase, therefore keep up your courage, men, for I believe God. Okay? He absolutely has that trust that God's going to take care of it. He doesn't know how, right? The angel didn't say, and so this is what's going to happen. You're going to do this and that. Although there is a phrase in 26, but we must run aground on a certain island.
I like the way you said that, is we're running around, but on a certain island, not
Yeah,
just any island.
Any old island. There's going to be a
Yes.
particular
Yeah,
one.
I'm blowing you over to that one over there. you know.
Exactly. And I presume that Luke didn't record, or why Paul didn't say that in the angel statement by Frank.
All right, Frank.
I'm sure it's just the way it was just written.
Mine says some island.
Some
Just
island, yeah.
running around on a certain island.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know about the however, I mean, I guess people think of being saved as different ways. Saved as in, here comes a bigger ship, picks us up and takes us on and we don't even get our feet wet. But I can't imagine that because all ships, the technology didn't allow,
Anybody go through this storm?
Right.
Yeah.
you know, so I don't see how they had a choice. And they've already thrown the cargo overboard if this is truly sequential.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to save other than the ship itself.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the owners can't say, oh, well, I can get it'll be a little late, but I can still get my profit, you know?
Right.
They're past that.
Right.
So I don't know, but what I thought was interesting is the first thing the angel said, and this is a whole other discussion, is do not be afraid. I forgot, I saw the number one time, it's like, the number of times angels came to speak to humans,
Uh-huh.
the first phrase is always, do not be afraid, is like 98% or something like that.
Right. Wow.
But here it's a different application. I don't see it as this radiant angel coming in here. Oh, don't be afraid. It's just me. It's just me. You know,
Just me.
here it's like, I don't see it that. It's more like, y'all are scared to death because you're about to, well, die, if you will.
Oh, I see.
And so don't be afraid of the storm.
Yeah, as
I got
opposed to
this.
don't be afraid
As
of me.
opposed to don't be afraid of me.
Ah.
So this is the first time I've seen it the other way around. But it may have been the other thing as well.
Yeah.
That's a whole discussion in itself.
That's true. Something I hadn't thought about. So the angel tells Paul that he must stand before
Just
Caesar, not
reminds
that
him
you
of that
will
thing,
or
yeah.
may or could, but it's a must. Okay. Therefore, keep up your courage, for I believe in God, that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. He has no doubt about that
Yeah.
whatsoever. Okay, we need to stop here. We're a minute or two behind. Any questions? Believe it or not, it doesn't immediately in the next verse get better.
Yeah.
Okay, because many other things are going to happen before
Right.
we get to that.
I don't understand how they can live 14 days without.
I can't even live a half an hour without knowing there's food coming. I start worrying if I don't think there's food coming.
And you can tell he's a lawyer because we wrote this. In my version, it says after whatever abstinence of food.
Yes, yes.
Instead of just saying without food.
There's an interesting technique of writing of, I think it's called diminutive phraseology. It's where you try to downplay everything. It wasn't such a big bad storm. It's kind of,
Yeah.
but yet it was a big
Well,
bad
the
storm.
Jewish language is a lot of that.
Yeah.
Whatever you call it.
Diminutive,
that-
yeah.
I've never heard of that
Yep.
terminology, but that's,
It's amazing
You know
how
us
things
programmers.
change. He was worried about being run aground on some island. I'm gonna go on vacation and be run aground on some island.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Times change, yeah.
Okay, we need to stop here. What are you guys praying for?